welcome to Murder and Mysteries with Megan. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, welcome back. I'm grateful for each and every one of you that are here today. On my channel, we talk about true crime, conspiracies, hauntings, and other types of mysteries. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. That way you're notified each and every time I upload a new video. In today's video, we are actually going to be continuing on with our Halloween themed topics. We are actually going to be talking about witches and witchcraft. Last week, as you know, we talked about zombies and a real-life zombie back in 2012 in Miami. However, this week, while we're doing our topic, we're going to be talking about witches and witchcraft here on Murder and Mysteries with Megan, while over on Pixel Gamer Girls, they're going to be having a special guest, Turtle, who will be making 3 delicious, tasty, and witchy desserts for us to check out after you're done here. I will link their channel in the description box below. Now, before we get into today's topic and video, I do want to make a quick disclaimer that I do not mean any disrespect or harm in any way, shape, or form to anyone that has certain beliefs or may believe different. We can all accept one another here, and the only thing that I'm presenting here are the facts that I was able to find throughout history. Typically, when people think of witches, especially around Halloween time, there are typical things that cross our minds. Many people think of a cackling witch riding her broomstick through the night sky, mixing potions in cauldrons, cursing others, making deals with the devil with her warts and all. And that's what the Christian church in Hollywood has portrayed for many, many, many years. But the truth of the matter is that it's actually quite dark and honestly depressing. In fact, there were many people that were persecuted simply for believing in different things than others did in the past. Many early witches were those who used magic or nature to call upon the spirits and for healing. They were those that would make potions or poultices using nature itself for simply being a natural healer and not going with the societal norms. The first mention of witches in history was actually back in biblical times. See, the witch of Endor was a woman that Saul had sought out. He went to meet her in disguise, not telling her of his true identity. He did this because previously, all witches and sorcery were outlawed within the communities. He had actually gone to visit her to get answers and to summon the spirit of Samuel after Saul had reached out to the prophets and asked for dreams and giving him answers, but to no avail. See, Saul wanted to speak with Samuel because he wanted to get advice from him in going up against the Palestinians in battle. However, when the witch summoned Samuel's spirit, she was frightened. Then the spirit actually reiterated something that Samuel had said while he was alive, that the entire army, as well as Saul, would end up being defeated and perish the following day. Sure enough, the next day, Saul's army was defeated, and he ended up taking his life by his own sword. It is believed that the publication Malleus Maleficarum is what truly spurred the witch mania the most. In fact, this book, within the first 100 years of publication, sold more copies than any other book in Europe other than the Bible. It is roughly translated to the Hammer of Witches, in which the book labeled witchcraft as heresy against the church and described how to lure it out, identify those, interrogate them, and hunt these witches. From biblical times up to more recent times, I say, but really the 16th and 17th centuries, witches and witchcraft were seen as evil by the church and many others. In fact, really all that one would have to do is point at someone and say, they are a witch. And this was really bad, because how could someone prove that they weren't a witch? And persecuting someone just because they have different beliefs than yours, or you believe that they caused you misfortune? Due to the publication of Malleus Maleficarum and accusations of people being witches during this time period, a very lucrative career path opened up: witch hunting. Witch hunters would go around to the different communities and townships in searching different locations for witches and performing tests on them to see if they really were witches and not just being accused of being one. There were 7 well-known tests to find out if someone was a witch or not. These tests included one called the swimming test, where the accused witches would be taken down to the nearest river, stripped of their clothing down to their underwear, have a rope tied around their waist and bound, and then they were thrown into the body of water. If they sunk instead of floating, then they were innocent and they weren't witches. Now, the ones performing this test would then pull the innocent up by the rope that was tied around their waist. Now, if the person thrown in the water actually floated and did not sink, then they were a witch. However, unfortunately, it was not uncommon for accidental drownings to happen during this time, even to the supposed innocent ones. This logic, well, it was the logic based on baptisms and the sacrament of the process. They believed that those who would float on the surface of the water, that the water was actually rejecting them and their body was rejecting the sacrament of baptism. Another test would be something like reciting the Lord's Prayer or other verses from the Bible without omitting anything or making any mistakes. Even if someone did do these things perfectly, it didn't mean that they were innocent. The next few tests that they would do actually kind of coincide with each other. Firstly, a witch hunter would actually search the accused witch of having the devil's mark that they supposedly got while making a deal with the devil. The problem is that scars, birthmarks, moles, tattoos, things like that were all these types of marks that they were looking for that they would call devil marks. They even stated that anyone with an additional nipple or that appeared to be as such, they were automatically witches because they only could have that third nipple because of the fact that they were suckling or feeding the witch's animals or familiars. When the signs of the witch's mark weren't visible to the naked eye, that didn't mean that they were necessarily innocent. If they were still suspected of witchcraft during this time, they would move on to scratching and pricking the accused with a needle, trying to bring out that witch's mark. If that part of it wasn't successful and they couldn't find any of those spots on the accused, they would bring in the victim of the witch and allow that person to begin scratching at the accused witch. Now, if their signs of the curse or possession went away while they were scratching at the accused witch, then that automatically meant that this person was a witch. Another test that they would do is make witches' cakes, which were actually the victim of the witch, their urine mixed with ashes and rye meal. They would then take this concoction and feed it to an animal or a witch's familiar and try to get the animal to reveal the one who placed the curse on the victim. One of the final ways that witch hunters would test the accused witches was making the witch physically say to their victim something along the lines of, "Since I am a witch, I am commanding you, the devil, to leave this person immediately." If the supposed possessed victim or cursed began improving, this of course would mean that person indeed was a witch. Now, the problem with every single one of these tests is that anyone could say, "Oh, they cursed me, I am ruined because of them," and then pretend to be possessed only to pretend to come out of this possession or cursing while the tests were being performed, making it seem as though that person was indeed a witch. Whether it was for something personal, they had different beliefs, they disagreed with them, or simply just didn't like the person, they could accuse them of being a witch at any time and with no proof at all. This actually led to a lot of turmoil across the world, from Salem, Massachusetts to England and across Europe. These practices were widely known and used. Witch hunts actually increased in the 17th century, resulting in the witch trials in early modern Europe, the Basque witch trials in Spain, the Fulda witch trials in Germany, the North Berwick witch trials in Scotland, the Torsiker witch trials in Sweden, and more in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Haven. Although the number of witches that were executed due to witchcraft is not fully known, it is believed by many scholars that between the 15th and the 18th century, that a total of at least 30 to 50,000 lives were taken due to being accused of witchcraft. Some scholars even believe that number to be up around 80,000 lives that were taken during this time. Now, there were many different methods of witches being executed across the centuries. Many of us know about witches being hung, beheaded, or even burned at the stake. Those are the common ones that you hear about. But did you know that there were many other ways that they were executed? Some were drowned by dunking them in a chair to weigh them down in the water. Others would have rocks piled on top of them one by one until they gradually suffocated and died. And others would even be sealed inside of iron maidens and dumped in the ocean to await their death. The different methods of taking these witches' lives is absolutely despicable, and I cannot imagine some of the torture and the pain that they went through during this time. It was in the 18th and 19th centuries that things started to change in the depiction of witches and witchcraft. Now, the fear and the devilish perception of witches didn't change during this time, but how witches were described and discussed did. This is when all of the stories and folk legends about witches began being told. One of the most famous of which was the story of Hansel and Gretel, the two children that go in the woods and find a hut, only to enter the witch's hut, to be thrown into the fire and later eaten. Stories like this, complete with shape-shifting, curses, and death, began circulating and being told as children's fairy tales and bedtime stories. During the 20th century, Hollywood began to take over on the scene when it came to witches and witchcraft. Movies like The Wizard of Oz with the Wicked Witch and Glinda the Good Witch, The Bell, Book, and Candle were beginning to form. Later in the century, more movies and shows would come out, like Hocus Pocus, The Craft, The Witches of Eastwick, Charmed, and others, that began to show a little bit of a different side to these witches. Of course, there still remained others out there, such as The Witches, The Blair Witch Project, and things like that, that showed the evil and the feared side of witches and witchcraft, as it had for many centuries. The fact of the matter is that for hundreds of years, witches and those who practiced what was seen as witchcraft were punished, persecuted, hunted, and killed, simply for just being different from the societal norms that everyone was used to. Whether calling on spirits or using herbs and natural healing processes, or even for some just with disagreeing with another person. Even to this day, there is a particular stigma that comes with practicing witchcraft, being Wiccan, or having pagan beliefs. The belief of Wicca, which came about as a religion about 100 years ago, and witchcraft is still a celebrated religion in modern times. Though tainted by the media's view on witches, making them look silly or evil, the religions attached to being a witch continue to be strong. In the U.S. alone, there were 390,000 pagans and Wiccans in 2008. Several recent studies actually indicate that that number has increased many times over, showing that in recent years that it may be as many as 1.5 million witches across the country. Cartoons have made witches goofy. Movie and fairy tales have made them evil, and the world has formed their own opinions on witches. But what remains today is mostly a nature-based, nature-loving, goddess-worshipping religion that has its roots in the very beginning of history. Well, everyone, that is it for me for today on our topic, witches and witchcraft. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and please keep an open mind as you read things and accept others as they are, even if their beliefs and their thoughts and opinions may be different from yours. It doesn't mean that they're awful or evil people. Let us love and accept one another and be kind to one another. Oh, and I strongly suggest that you do your own research on the subject to find out more. I hope that everyone has a wonderful and safe week. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and post notification bell, and maybe even give this video a thumbs up because it does really help out the channel. And don't forget to head on over to Pixel Gamer Girl's channel and to check out their coinciding video and recipe for witch's brew and other tasty treats. Happy Halloween month, stay spooky, and until next time, my mystery lovers, bye!